Good evening and welcome to our Monday, May 23rd, 2022 School Board Work Session. The time is now 6 p.m. The school board would like to take this moment to respectfully acknowledge we are residing on the traditional land of the Dene people. Mission statement. Our mission is to provide an excellent, equitable education in a safe, supportive environment so all students will succeed and contribute to a diverse and changing society. Mrs. Tuttle, can we get the roll call, please?
Mr. Sampson is expected. Mrs. Matheson is excused. Mr. Dorn?
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanderson?
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Marati?
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Luke?
Here.
Thank you. The board has a quorum.
Thank you so much. Our one agenda item of the evening is the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget discussion and work. Core value, center everything we do on the student and student learning. The budget discussion and work, including continued work on developing a fiscal year 2022-2023 approved budget, with the recommended budget add back priorities, consideration and discussion on possible board budget adjustments, work on developing the approved budget. I'd like to go ahead and turn the time over to administration.
Thank you, President Luke. So I just want to kind of frame the recommendations that we brought forward, a little bit of our thinking behind it, and then just footnote some things that may help inform the conversation. We broke it down into two groups of money, and the first one is that money that we know that we're getting, and that's the $650,000 additional from the borough. That's already been allocated to us. We know we can count on that, and our recommendation for those addition of those kindergarten teaching assistants was based on that these positions were cut from the budget and not picked up in CARES. So these positions went away altogether, and by having this guaranteed money, we can bring them back. The second group of priorities is based on what the budget that the legislative bodies sent to the governor, which included a one-time funding for public education. So these numbers, and Mr. DeGraw will probably talk a little bit to that, these are general amounts because that allocation is based on our enrollment for next year. So these are general amounts, not necessarily hard and fast amounts, but they're a place for us to work with. So that's a couple of footnotes. Also, in some of the legislation that went to the governor's office includes a $30 increase to the BSA. So if that is signed into law, there will be another additional amount of money, not much, $30 is not a huge amount, but we'll take it, however it comes. About $700,000, I think, is what our allocation would be with the $30 increase. So those things are out there waiting for the governor's signature. Until then, we're working with speculative amounts and general ideas. So with that, here's our priorities as we identified them. I want to thank Nico and Sandy for being here tonight. We have our interactive spreadsheet back that we can manipulate as we go through this process, identifying the board's priorities. So with that, we'll be ready to start.
All right, thank you, Ms. Moline. Just before we jump into the next tab, which will illustrate the interactive spreadsheet that we used, I believe it was the regular meeting or a special meeting, worksite, must have been a special meeting where we approved the recommended budget. We'll be using a similar spreadsheet to that. Before we jump in there, just this highlights on the screen what Ms. Moline was just referencing we have, the top line is 184,085,055. That's our current recommended budget revenue in the book that we have. And so then the three subsequent lines illustrate estimates. The 650,000, the first one, that is an exact number. That is the number that the borough appropriated additional to the school district. We're extremely grateful for that additional appropriation they made. The next two lines are estimates that Ms. Moline referenced, $710,000 in the READS Act that was passed, specifically increased the BSA by $30. So not really much of a substantial increase, but we'll take every dollar that the state is willing to give. So we're also appreciative of that. And then the last line is an estimate for the one-time funding that we will receive. The total amount statewide was $57 million in one-time supplemental appropriations, and we will receive that on a pro rata basis based on our enrollment compared to the rest of the state and the rest of the state school districts. So whatever percentage our enrollment is as of the 20-day count next October, that will determine exactly how much of that $57 million we receive.
Mr. Doran?
Okay, thank you for the update on the READS Act. That was the piece I was looking for. But is there any additional costs that we anticipate in order to be in compliance with the READS Act? My thinking is that we're already doing a lot of what the READS Act says, but I still want to double check.
So my response to that, Mr. Doran, that's a good question. My response is that I got the feeling that the $30 increase was put in to compensate for additional requirements to school districts, but I would not be able to, that's out of my realm of expertise, what our district would need to do additional to what, and to your point, maybe we're already doing it, but I don't know.
Yes, to answer your question, we are doing most of what is in the READS Act already, so it wouldn't be necessarily additional, for instance, a literacy screener, that type of thing we already do. So we would still need to maintain all the things that we're already doing. So it wouldn't be any real increase to what we're already doing.
So this 700,000 is actually an additional money
Yes.
for us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
To a large degree, compensating the district for things we're already doing.
Ms. Marotti?
So we're talking about intent, I think, of the funds, and so the intent of the READS Act was for things that we're already doing. I, for myself, before we vote on this, if someone could send us what the intent is, even if we're already doing it, so maybe a list of what the intent of those funds are for. And then can you let us know what the intent of the borough's additional 650,000 is?
Yes, so there was, I was not present for the meeting, did not hear audio of the meeting. The message I received was that their desire was that it be utilized for kindergarten teaching assistants. However, officially, legally, technically, the Borough Assembly does not have the authority to dictate usage of district funds. So that would be 100% the purview of the Board of Education to allocate. Now, our recommendation, as you're going to see, lines up with, and we're going to take the approach that we'll see on the next illustration, is that we're not necessarily separating out the additional revenue. We have the additional revenue bunched together, and then we're going to go off of a list. So, it might be a little bit of semantics, but our recommendation, for what it's worth, from staff is to restore kindergarten teaching assistants.
May I follow up?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that we're in line with the intent. I am aware that legally they can't dictate what the funds will be used on, but I think that in order to maintain the relationship that we're building with the borough, that it would behoove us to be in line with the intent if we can.
Yes, they communicated that desire, and we have it high on our list. So yes, point taken, Ms. Marotti.
Ms. Sanderson?
Just to piggyback, after attending the reading symposium, the monies that were designated that the legislators have put in, that's a 2-year program going forward, and how we're going to implement that program here. So I walked away thinking that we needed to make sure that we have real accountability and transparency on that also, because, the conversation is, Alaska's down here on the reading, and this is what we want to put the money toward. So how are we going to make sure that we have something we can look back and say, here's what we did with that money? Because that's the piece that they're constantly coming at us, a couple of legislators from down in different areas. That was their platform, so.
So to follow up on that, Ms. Anderson, I appreciate those comments, because that was also entered into our thinking in this, is moving things that we have funded in CARES into the general fund so we can focus some of those CARES monies on that very thing. We're launching a literacy focus next year with a very clear outcome, starting here, ending there kind of an approach. So having some of those CARES funds available, which is what they were designed for, is to fill in any kind of gaps that might have been created by the pandemic. So using some of those CARES funds for that very specific reason.
Ms. Marati?
Through the chair, to Ms. Sanderson's comment about what the intent of the READS Act that she became aware of through the symposium. And then Ms. Moline just said that it's that exact focus that these funds are being used on, but I missed, what is that?
So the READS Act and the symposium were two separate pieces of the same puzzle. There wasn't the symposium wasn't necessarily a program,
Right.
but a focus on a practice that increases reading outcomes. So the READS Act then has some of those components in it. So, for instance, those the 5 components of reading you'll see in the READS Act. So if you get a literacy screener, he needs to have those 5 components. There's training that is made available through the state that specifically focuses on what the science of reading indicates is good practice for readers. So while they're two separate things, they're both pieces to the same puzzle to move us forward as a state and as a district to improve our reading.
Can I follow up?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I fully understand that they're two separate things. One's an act, one was a symposium. But it sounded like you guys were talking about specific things, and you just brought up 2. So literacy screeners, state training. Was there anything else that would cost money that we can relate back to the literacy focus that you're talking about?
Staffing is being one of them. So our kindergarten aides, bringing them back into the classroom to support reading in the classroom. Training is something else that you mentioned. Training costs money. So that's a big piece. The other thing, and while we're still putting our strategic approach into a form, also looking at any kind of purchases that we can make with CARES money that will live past the CARES money. So there's a number of different computer-based programs that help support struggling readers. So if we were to purchase a computer-based program, or even paper pencil based, we would have that could live past the life of the money. So looking at those kinds of things, having these CARES funds available to use for those very kinds of things, programs, staffing, training, all of those focused very specifically around literacy and reading.
Thank you.
All right. And so then this again, this is an estimate of what we're going to be looking at by way of additional revenue. And I'll wait to get to this next point. I'll first go to timeline. So timeline, here's where we stand. The legislature wrapped up their business on the 18th, I believe it was. The governor, I think the clock started ticking on the 19th. He has 10 days, not counting Sunday, to do his work. So sign off, vetoes, et cetera. We need, the three of us here, the two experts right here, we need official word by this Friday in order to be ready to have the documents and to have the budget balanced to notice to the public to do our work on June 7th. We need that by this Friday. If we don't get word from the governor official by Friday, then we'll need to have a special meeting. And that special meeting can be super brief. It doesn't have to be. We're gonna set the table, and then we can have further discussions at the regular meeting just to make sure the board understands exactly where we sit. We're gonna do a lot of the legwork tonight to get your guys' priorities and et cetera, et cetera. So just timeline-wise, that's where we stand. We need word by Friday. We need certainty by Friday. If not, we'll need to have a special meeting after the 7th.
So I will just make one quick adjustment there. That governor has 20 days. So he could take it, it could move into past our time for the June 7th, but that's kind of the timeframe that the governor has to work with.
So it's possible we won't have word by Friday. That's possible. Hopefully, it seems like we don't expect curveballs, but we'll see. So that's the timeline for the board. All right. So here is a sheet that we can work with tonight. It's kind of difficult to maneuver. How do you do that? Right there. Maybe a little bit better. Is that too small? Trying to fit as much on the screen as possible. You have a CARES list, a recommended budget CARES list in your packet for reference. And here I'll give a summary just to kind of orient everyone here. On the far left, and you can see my cursor, yeah, we have our recommended budget revenue and expenditures, the 184 million. That's our starting point. The additional revenue here that we outlined on the prior screen is the 6,360,000. Okay, for a total new revenue of 190 million, roughly 190.5. Again, that number is going to change by the approved budget, so expect to see different numbers. But as it stands now, these are our estimates. The total ads that are included in Ms. Moline's memo that was sent to the board, this is our starting point that we're going to start from tonight, is this $5 million right here. That creates a total amount allocated of 189 million, just shy of 189.1 million. And the remainder here, there's 1.3 million that hasn't been allocated yet. That, and that's one of the items in the list in the memo, is an allocation to fund balance. Okay, so total ads here on line 10, total allocated in the budget on line 12, and then the remainder, the difference, as long as that's green, that's an amount going that would be allocated, identified to go to fund balance. And then down below here, and here's your CARES budget. There's the 15.1 that we have identified to be remaining at the end of this fiscal year. The recommended budget had 11 million, almost exactly 11 million allocated for a remainder of 4 million. These adjustments reduced the 11 million allocated down to 7.4, with a remainder of about 7.7. Those adjustments, again, the adjustments identified in the memo are in blue on the screen here. Okay, so this is the list that was approved for the recommended budget, the CARES list, and the blue identified item, for example, here highlighted, instead of CARES, the staff has recommended that the district-wide activity coordinator be moved back to the general fund. And so that removed $121,060 from the CARES budget and moved it back to the general fund budget. Okay, that's one example of what we recommended. Another example is the 7 FTE maintenance positions for a total of $881,000. Again, moved from CARES over to general. So those are the various actions outlined in the memo that we took here on this interactive spreadsheet. These in the center are all FTE related changes, and then on the far right over here are simply non-FTE related items. So e-learning licenses, et cetera. The one adjustment here doesn't necessarily have to do with CARES, but it's general fund. There's adding back the district-wide activity funding that was cut, the 20% cut to that funding for a total of 220. So that, other items here down at the bottom here are the 14 kinder aides that we're adding back that were outright cut. The 18 are right here on line 15. So those 18 that we maintain in CARES, there we're identifying them back to the general fund. Then the other 14 down here that were cut outright and not restored with CARES funding are being brought back into the general fund. We have identified to move 11 classroom teachers from CARES back to general fund. That's another item. And then high school counselors we also had on the list, more towards the bottom of the priority, but those were added back into general fund as well. So that's kind of an overview of the spreadsheet. Ms. Herbert will be driving that tonight if we need her to make adjustments at the desire of the board. Are there any questions? A lot of numbers flying around all at once. I just want to make sure everybody understands conceptually what we've done here. So kind of a hodgepodge of taking current CARES expenditures, moving back to general, and then a few items bringing back from being cut outright back into general fund. The net result, freeing up additional CARES dollars that the district can utilize, reading initiatives, doing the things that board members have talked about, meeting the standards set by the READS Act, et cetera, so.
Ms. Marati?
In the memo, it says potential additional 5 million state funding, but the amount that, if you add all of those up, is 5.3 million. What am I missing? Why would
So
it?
the 6.3 million, that's the 5 million plus the 650. So we've lumped all additional revenue that we're expecting.
On the memo? So in the memo, it has it broken out. The 650 is separate. And this is additional 650 allocated from the borough, 14 kindergarten teaching assistants, remaining funds to the fund balance. And then potential additional 5 million state funding. And then it has those listed, 9 options, and then the amounts next to each one. And if you add those amounts up, it's 5.3 million, not 5 million.
So it could be, I'm not sure, I want to make sure I understand the question. So this memo does not include the 700,000 from the READS Act.
Okay, so it's not supposed to balance.
Correct.
On the memo.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not necessarily balancing the memo to these numbers tonight, Ms. Marati. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So conceptually, what we're looking at, I think the main overriding topic here is we don't know. These are estimates as far as the revenue increase that we're going to see. It's impossible for us to pinpoint that. The important thing to come out of this meeting tonight is to have a prioritized list established by the board where we as staff can confidently go and We have an estimate of about 6.3 million here total, Borough, Reads Act, BSA increase, and one time. Maybe it ends up being 6.5 million. We'll be able to just go and confidently add items back based on our work tonight. Maybe it ends up being maybe it's less than that 6.3. Maybe it really ends up being 6.1. We'll still just go down the list until the funds are exhausted. And so important to remember, us not knowing the exact amount of revenue we'll receive additional, just having that prioritized list from the board will be helpful. That's really what we want to accomplish tonight.
I put my name in the queue. I do have just a clarifying question and then a possible statement. So we have the 14 kindergarten teaching assistants, which would utilize the 650,000 that was allocated through the borough, with the additional after that would go into the fund balance. And then everything below that, numbers 1 through 9, or oh my gosh, I'm having a hard time. I must have spent too much time on this one today. It's already added back to the budget through the CARES funding, correct?
Not 100% sure I understand your question, Ms. Luke. These numbers reflect these items, yes, already added. These actions have been taken in this illustrative sheet.
Okay, so the 18 are already in CARES. The 11 FTE are already in CARES. The maintenance position, the activity funding was the one thing that was cut. The Barnett, assistant principals, activity coordinator, and high school counselors, those were already added back through CARES, correct?
Everything except the high school counselors, those were also outright cut.
Okay, so to simplify, could we, and hear me out, could we not just keep it as is? We have the kindergarten aides, we have the money from the borough, it's already a guarantee, they're giving it to us. Utilize that for the kindergarten aides. Keep the funding, the CARES funding that we've already spent countless hours debating and deliberating over and truly poring over those ideas. Keep that as is. And the money that we could potentially be adding to our budget from the state go directly into the fund balance so that, I don't know, we can actually be within our own policies where we're putting that money away. And some of the reasons for my thought process on this is, one, it has a clean line of delineation. We have already discussed our COVID funding, our CARES funding. We have, as I said, we have deliberated over that and over it and over it and over it. This keeps it simple. It also alleviates the possibility of, let's say, the funding doesn't come before Friday. We already know what our answer is going to be. We can already vote on that at our meeting without having to wait to hear what the state says. Because our vote can be, if any additional funding comes from the state, it goes directly into the fund balance. Therefore, that alleviates and stops having to have another meeting to then deliberate again when this is the recommendation from the district and it's something that we have already come to agreement upon. It's just different pots of funding. But in my opinion as well is that we have already stated that that is one-time funding. The community has already been on notice about those sources of funding. And so it helps us to really move into that next phase as we went to the borough and discussed, this is our step down, and this is what it's going to look like. And so it would keep things simple. It would allow us to vote June 7th. And it would allow us to ensure that we have an actual fund balance with the uncertainty with fuel prices, the uncertainty with electric prices. I mean, not even just heating fuel for the buildings, but we pay for the fuel for the buses. So there's the uncertainty of that cost, the uncertainty of what the food cost is going to be for our nutrition program. I would suggest that we, as a board, think through this next fiscal year of the possibility that that $5 million that we put into our fund balance might have to be utilized to feed our students, or pay heating fuel bill, or bus route to pay for fuel for one of the buses. Just my opinion. I think it would simplify things, and it would also behoove the district to have that funding available and not tied to COVID grant money, but actual fund balance money that can then be utilized at a moment's notice if need be.
The board will receive no argument from me on anything related to bolstering our fund balance or simplicity moving forward, so.
So what, to add to Mr. DeGraw's profound statement, that I think it's important to note that whatever we move from CARES into general fund with this one-time money is still one-time money. So essentially, we're moving it from one one-time pocket to another one-time pocket, which means we'll have this conversation this time next year as well. So that's a consideration in all of this conversation, is that we are essentially moving one-time money pockets with this funding.
Ms. Marotti?
I fully understand that this is one-time money, and we need to think about it as a one-time investment, not a long-term solution. But I do, because we're being maybe given these funds, I do want to look at some of the things that we did eliminate due to the funding situation, and see if we can just revisit those. We've heard so much testimony and so much outcry on different areas that I think that we owe it to our community to discuss these things and not just set them aside and forget about them. So that being said, I'm wondering if you can provide us with a few things. The first one, if through the chair, if the board would like to do this, the cost to provide a 1% salary increase to the staff for 3 years. The impact that the admin's recommendations through the memo, the impact that might have on PTR. I can't tell if it does or not. Is it because it's just replacing what's in the CARES funds, not adding any additional FTE, then it doesn't?
Correct. Yeah, so I can say that there's no impact on PTR, no reductions in class.
Good or bad?
Yeah, correct, yeah. So no impact on FTE.
Because we're not adding
Well,
any more.
correct, related directly to the classroom instructional teachers. So you do
Right.
have, as I referenced, you do have the 3 high school counselors.
Right, but that doesn't affect the PTR, right?
Correct,
Okay.
right.
Also, to be considered the elementary band and orchestra for 3 years, because I believe Ms. LaPlante said it was 1.3 to bring that back, million. And so for 3 years, just to confirm, that would be 3.9. And then the art center, what would be the cost to bring that back for 3 more years? Those were the things. I think there were other things that were eliminated completely, not covered by CARES or general fund. Can you recall others that we eliminated?
There was a reduction in activity coordinators.
But that's already in here, right? No. Oh, not covered by the CARES funds. Was it 2?
Correct. It was, there were some half-time FTEs. It was 3 positions, but it wasn't 3 might have even been 4 positions. We moved from a position, some of them were half at each high school, down to 1 district-wide FTE. So you had 1 at each Lathrop, West Valley, Hutch, North Pole, and Ben Eielson. I believe it was 3.5 total FTE.
Okay.
And then,
So would it be 2.5 because we kept the 1 or, okay.
yeah. And then, yeah, that, we'd have to circle back for any kind of comprehensive list on actual positions that were cut. But I think we're pretty close on what's been mentioned. I can respond to the first item that you had, a 1% district-wide for all staff.
I mean, I don't feel like we can give it to some and not
Um,
others.
Sorry, could I
fairly.
raise a point of order? And I may be wrong on it, but could I ask the question?
Please ask the
Procedure.
question.
Okay. My concern is whether we're negotiating. And I may be wrong on that, because I know in budget, we have sometimes put something in depending
I will uphold-
negotiations, but it's just a question that I have, and I don't know the answer.
I'm
Concern.
going to uphold, just, I don't want to cross a line. Negotiations. Thank you, Mr. Doran.
So specifically to the music program, I believe it was either 10 or 11 FTE, certified FTE, and that would be in about the $1.2 million range for music. The art center, originally that was at 4 FTE, but we've scaled back a couple of times. The 4 FTE would be, it'd be around $475,000 would be the cost for that at 4 FTE. And each certified FTE is about $118,000. That's our average teacher salary.
Did you have a follow-up with?
Yeah, sorry. Do you happen to know are the activity coordinators that 118?
We'd have to look and see what some of them are certified and others are non-certified. So we could find that information.
Okay.
I have Mr. Doran, then Miss Sanderson, and then Miss Smith.
Okay. I'm going to let's go with a couple. One clarification, and I'm assuming we're going to come to the CARES 2.3 handout that you gave us at some point. Is that correct? So you can explain what fully that is.
For clarification, Mr. Dorn, that is just a copy of what was approved for CARES spending. So that's just a point of reference.
Right, okay, but some things are bolded and some things are not, some things are carried over, some things are not. So let me go ahead with my question. I'm assuming we will get to that sheet, so.
We can, but as Ms. This is simply an illustration for a point of reference. I can't speak to why why certain lines are bolded. But that is the list that the board approved at the recommended budget. This is the recommended CARES budget.
I know
the board
that,
approved. Okay.
right, but we're making potential adjustments to it, but,
Yes.
so, okay, question on that specific is, by moving 11 classroom teachers over to the memo side, general funding, that leaves 35.4 positions in CARES.
Correct.
Okay. And part of the reason I'm asking this is so we get a CARES clean list of what's, comes out with the $7 million that we have carryover in a sense for next year.
Yes.
So that's why I'm,
And this would be, not exactly, but this would be, we would generate a cleaned up CARES list.
Okay.
Yes, correct, Mr. Dorn.
and my second thing is, I wanted to second what President Luke said, how we actually do this in the most simplistic manner possible, I certainly support. And I think some of the things that were mentioned, we do have some unknowns, costs of fuel, utilities. We have ongoing negotiations. We have, busing and a lot of different things. We don't know what our final enrollment will be, et cetera. So we expect we'll come back with some adjustments. That being said, one of my questions is that we consider that general fund use versus grant money, it's all one time. And so I'm hesitant to add things that we've already seriously cut this, and made program adjustments. I'm going to say, band orchestra, we've really worked hard to get that solidified for 6th, 7th, and 8th grades program, to put something out there for 1 year, the Arts Center for 1 year. Are concerns that I would have, since we're going to be at this with the legislature next year. So as we go forward, that's one of the things, if we can do it simplistically, that's great. But I would just ask that the administration also think accounting-wise, and to a certain extent, I'd love to see more in general fund, because it says this is what we need to operate, and it's not just a grant funded, oh yeah, we can do this. We need this money, and we're going to have to make that argument next year. So I think actually using the money carries better weight as we project forward. So that's kind of the approach I'm taking, and then I'll like to get back in the queue for some specific questions.
Yeah, could I respond to that, Ms. President?
Yes,
Luke?
please.
Yeah, so great care was taken by Ms. Moline, myself, executive directors, to create a list that didn't add back a significant amount of items that have been cut for the reason that you just outlined, Mr. Doran, that, yeah, if we're dealing with one-time money, we're going to be right back around here at the same spot next year. We kept it to a key small number of items. District-wide activity funding has been cut tremendously over the past several years, multiple times. That we thought was important. High school counselors, in the age of coming out of COVID, we felt like social and emotional support's there. And then the kindergarten teaching assistant. So those were really the three main items that we were bringing back from outright cut, and we felt like those went straight to really specific core missions of the district. And then I am 100% on board with the thought, at least from I can't speak for Ms. Moline, but yes, if it is the desire of the board to maintain funds in the general fund, as a couple of board members have articulated, no argument from me.
Agreed.
Thank you. We have Ms. Sanderson.
So, Mr. DeGraw, can you talk to me about the 7 maintenance positions? Can you break that down?
Yeah, I can get a specific list, but they are positions such as electricians, HVAC, general, what's the term? Routine maintenance, preventative maintenance type position. There's at least one, which we're lacking right now tremendously. Just somebody going around and monitoring key systems at the schools and facilities. There was a grounds position, which we're lacking. So, but we can get a complete list for you. But those were the highlights: HVAC, electrician, grounds, preventative maintenance, positions of that nature. And those, I will say, we can't eliminate those 7 maintenance positions. We've talked often of this CARES list of, we're going to come to a crossroads where we're going to have to determine, where does it go? Does it get cut outright, or does it get put back in the general fund, and we find somehow to pay for it? Those maintenance positions, we cannot lose those maintenance positions. Even with those 7 positions, we've reduced beyond what we responsibly ought to, where we responsibly ought to be with our facilities. So.
And then my follow-up was the Barnett, the PTR for Barnett. Can you talk to me about that? Oh, that's that's one position.
Yeah, so that's actually 2.5 FTE, all instructional. 0.5 of it is, what's the term for Barnett?
Exploration.
Exploratory, thank you. And then 2 regular classroom teachers with the current PTR applied to Barnett, not the new PTR that the board approved for next year. So that's the nature of those 2.5 positions.
Okay, thank you.
2 regular classroom and then a 0.5 exploratory.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you. I support putting as much of the additional funding as possible into savings. I do not support adding back any dramatic programs or any kind of across-the-board staff wage increase.
I have Ms. Marati, Mr. Dorn, and then myself in the queue.
Thank you. So it's been stated that we cannot use one-time funds for long-term issues. I've even said it, but because we'll just have to cut it next year. It's kind of the theme that's going. But I disagree with that because we could prioritize a few things that our community has cried out for multiple years. We could if we wanted to. So it's not that we can't, but we could. But that being said, I also need to know what it would cost to not reduce the ESSA contract days. Because I think that's something that we need to consider as well. I think we've received testimony on that, and it's not a
Ms.
negotiated, it's not a
Oh,
negotiated
that's right.
item.
It's
It
not
is not.
negotiated.
Correct, yeah.
You're right.
It
Thank
was in
you.
the budget. I've been told a lot of times.
Yes.
Anyways, can we
I
find out
apologize.
how much that would cost?
Yeah, that it is between $700,000 and $800,000 is
Okay.
the cost estimate that we had on those 5 days. Yes, good catch, not negotiated.
Thanks.
With all of that, I get a little confused, so thank you. Oh, sorry, Ms. Marati, did you?
No, I just think that that's something we need to consider. We heard some really good testimony from ESSA about how it would impact our staff and their families personally by eliminating some of their contract days. And I really think that that's an investment that we can make to retain our staff by not taking those days away from them.
Mr. Doran?
Specific to that point, I think it is something that we should look at. Those 5 days, it is part of retention and recruitment. It is a reduction of for staff is cutting their contract time. So I would say, it's worth our really looking at that, and it's been as a straight budget item, in fairness to staff and the competitiveness and shortage of labor, something to really look at. Then I would also like to toss out and get board reaction to adding the equivalent of one activity director. That would be a half-time allocation to Ben Eielson and a half-time to Hutch. The reason is they are our 2 smallest high schools. They have 2 administrators and many activities, pretty comparable. In some ways, it could be more, given the numbers, for their size of activities to monitor and support. By putting in the assistant principals, which I highly support, that we've done that in the budget, and for the bigger high schools, with the idea that one of the assistant principals is going to take on the activity director positions, which they have done in the past, and was one of the years ago when they were increased in the numbers of assistant principals. That was one of the things they were doing and kept in mind. But I think our 2 smallest high schools, are really impacted without that activity support. And to expect a district-wide one person to help, actually be helping all the high schools, I would assume would be available to help cover some of the activities as an administrator. But those two high schools, we either burden that one person with heaviest responsibility for those two small high schools. And I also keep in mind North Pole, they do have two assistant principals, not as high as the big high schools, the bigger ones, but you know, we do have two schools that are heavily limited, and it's been evident over the years. So
President Luke, and just to give some context to the board on an activity coordinator cost, we're looking at an average cost of about $120,000 for one FTE. That includes benefits. So just to provide some context there.
Thank you. So we've been talking about this for an hour, and we've kind of stated our intent and our stance on where we are. Like I said, I am good with that 650, putting the rest into the fund balance, and keeping the items that we already have in our CARES funding where they are, and utilizing any extra money from the state directly into the fund balance. I look at the list of items that we would like to add back, such as more high school counselors, the district activity funding, the art center music, all of these items. I just am concerned about the fact that we need to just be very vigilant in this next year. We have spent a lot of time ensuring that the cuts that we are making are having the least effect on our students and their success. I am not stating that any of these positions are not good positions to have. I totally agree that they are great and they are valued. I just don't want to sit here next year. Well, I don't want the board to have to be in a position next year to do all of that heavy lifting that we did this year, and especially like with the music program, completely restructuring the music program to be a music program that could be successful, and do it all again next year. I just think it would be effective to have that money in our fund balance so that we are following our own policy that we have not been following. Ms. Marati?
Thanks. I think you're right. Through the chair, I feel like we've said our piece, and I'm wondering if we're going to use the cool spreadsheet that they brought to run some of these scenarios through that some of us have talked about.
Yes, that we can definitely run some of those scenarios, and kind of see where it goes. I just want to make sure that while we are running scenarios, they are things that the board in general is kind of moving forward on, and that it's not like what I've stated, it's not just my desire that we do this and that we just do it my way, but that we are cognizant of, obviously we can't vote, but that it's the will of multiple board members.
So one thing we could do is just illustrate what a couple of board members have articulated of just moving back to a CARES list similar to what the board approved at the recommended budget and see what that looks like, and then we can take a couple of other scenarios beyond that. Just give us a moment. Okay, so this is an illustration of what generally would happen. The way this changed was, again, we have total estimated revenue for the approved budget. And again, that's an estimate that the actual number is not going to be 190, 445, 055. It's going to be different. We have total ads of 725, which is going to be the kinder aids. Yeah. There it is. Okay, we just fixed that. That's the kindergarten aids move into the general fund, the 14. And so then you have total allocated of 184.7 million with 5.7 million going to fund balance. And then CARES, the CARES budget stays pretty much where the board had it recommended, 11 million, 11.1 million, with the remaining amount projected at the end of FY23 of approximately $4 million. We have eliminated the restoration of the district-wide activity funding, eliminated the 3 high school counselor add back, and I think those were the 2 main add backs that we eliminated. So these along the far left, that's how the numbers would look, and just important to note this area right in here, that's the fund balance add based on the additional revenue, maintaining a CARES budget very similar to what was approved by the board that recommended. And then adding in the 14 kindergarten teaching assistants utilizing additional revenue from the borough.
Thank you. I've got Ms. Smith, Mr. Doran, Ms. Marati, and myself.
Thank you. I would support the general fund or adding to the fund balance $5 million. And if the funding were to come in higher than $5 million, for us to have a priority list after that. That I think $5 million is not even halfway to our recommended fund balance, but at least it's getting to halfway.
It'd be a big step.
And that if the potential additional state funding were more than $5 million, to prioritize the rest of the kindergarten teaching assistants, and then the activities fund, the high school counselors and other things.
Mr. Doran?
Okay, I think you confused me. And I'm not sure why we just all of a sudden dropped out the high school counselors. So I like the recommendations from the administration and the way they've laid those out, including indicating $1 million into the fund balance, which gives us a good buffer if we have a higher enrollment or if we have a lower enrollment, helps us out in either way, or unexpected expenses. With that being said, and perhaps I do have two other things I'd like to put on the table for the board to consider. And it might be worth getting a sense of the board and then playing around with numbers rather than each one individually. Just a thought. The other two pieces that I'd like to put out there is restoring at least $10,000, if not the $15,000 to the board travel. I felt it was important that we make a reduction in that area in light of our major deficits and asking everyone else to make a cut. But my concern is, and I make the argument for 10,000 instead of 15, is that the legislature came out with just a one-time deal. And they, so which means we're going to be back at advocating heavily next year. And it's not an election year. And I think a face-to-face becomes important. Cutting our travel budget completely means we have no wherewithal to go and talk with others than our interior delegation, really, making advocacy for. Also, I think it's important for our board training to have something in our budget as well. As in various recent discussions, board members have said it's important we keep learning as a board to be supportive of our administration and to operate together. We are looking at least one, maybe two new board members next year, their learning curves, et cetera. And I think it's short-sighted. That's my opinion, but I put it out in terms of saying that we should have something to support our efforts to advocate for kids. The other one is that I am concerned about Hutchinson High School and the fact that we cut their small school allocation. They are a magnet school, and we are, based on the idea of being a magnet school, we've provided extra staffing for Barnett. I think inequity is to support the magnet status of Hutch, which goes beyond its 400 student official enrollment because they take about 150 or so students from other high schools for which they do not get staffed for. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. As a magnet, inequity support both we have two magnet schools. I would say we should support them. So those are the two others areas besides the one I mentioned as two half-time activity directors for our two smallest high schools, Ben Eielson and Hutch. So, but I'd love to get feedback from other board members on those.
Ms. Marati?
Thank you. First, through the chair to, in response to Mr. Doran's suggestions, I also support the magnet status of Hutch, since we did support the magnet status of Barnett. That seems fair and equitable to me. Can I get clarification? So with admin's recommendation for the approved budget, how much fund balance from general fund and how much fund balance from CARES funds would be left or would be provided?
So it was the original illustration. It was about $1.3 million of general fund balance. And then it was about 7.8, 7.9 million of CARES remaining instead of increased from the 4 million. It's showing right here.
Okay, and then so 1.3 plus. So 9.2, if we go with admin's recommendation, would be the projected fund balance, right? Total,
How do you get the 9.2, Ms. Marody?
7.9 plus 1.3?
What's the 7.9? I'm sorry.
You said that was the leftover in CARES?
Oh. Okay, those are different buckets.
Right, but
So,
but if you combine them, then because it's money that we can use next year.
yes.
So it's total would be 9.2.
Okay,
Amount of funds left over next year.
okay.
Yeah, projected,
Yes,
of course.
yes. Those,
Okay, so 9.2 if we go with admins, and then is it for, if we go with what some board members have suggested, so if the board approves to not fund anything that has been previously eliminated from the recommended budget, then the projected fund balance would be 9.6?
and that's the 5.7 and the 3.981?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
The
so-
difference there is probably we deleted the activity funding
And
and the
high school
counselors. Yeah, that would be the
counselors,
difference
okay.
of those two numbers, correct?
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Can I get what the number is? It looks like there's 3.5 educators from Hutch. So what
The-
would that number be to restore that?
To Mr. Doran's talking point about restoring, so we reduced their small school allocation from 5 down to 3, so we reduced 2.0 FTE instructional staff.
So is that what, 240?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay. I think, Ms. Smith brought up a great point, that 5 million, because it costs how much per week to run the district on average? About 5 million?
Yeah, a little less than 5 million, 4 million and change.
Okay. So I'm just going to put it out there. I don't feel comfortable going any lower than 5 million in our fund balance. That makes me incredibly nervous, and it would be as though my family has only a week's worth of savings. That's a terrifying thought. And I had Miss Smith, Mr. Sampson.
Thank you. I'd just like to maybe clarify or make sure I have it right in my mind. But the difference here is about where the money is. Because if it's in CARES, we cannot just use it to pay our heating oil bill. We cannot just use it to buy fuel for the school buses. If we have it in our fund balance, we can use it for literally any issue that arises. The CARES funds, we have carefully determined these are the things we can use these funds for. It's all approved. It's all good to go. Putting the money into our savings fund allows it to be easily accessed, readily available for emergencies, and not having to be approved for use. That's really the difference that we're talking about here.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Sampson.
Thank you. My apologies for being late. I was working, so I don't have a feel for where the board sits on it, but I can tell you that I am with the president on this, that I do not support making any more add backs anymore in addition to the ones that we've previously agreed to. 1 week's operating budget is unacceptable. 2 weeks operating budget is unacceptable. 3 weeks is getting closer to where we need to be. I'm at a loss as to really why we're having this conversation and we have such little in the bank. Also, you know, the borough sent us over almost $750,000, and it sounded like they had some intentions for how we were to use that money. And it had to do with kindergarten aides. And I'm just really curious as to the data on the kindergarten aides. The data that I've looked at shows that the kindergarten aides, the classrooms that hold kindergarten aides are not necessarily producing an uptick in reading comprehension, reading ability in the classrooms. So I wonder if it's not better suited to be for tutors as opposed to kindergarten aides. I know that sounds really nice, kindergarten aides to help the kindergarten teachers, but what about the first grade teachers and their aides, and the second grade teachers and the third grade teachers and the, what's the deal with the kindergarten teachers? The data that I shows that one school I looked at had 33 kids in the red, meaning they can barely read and can't write. And at the end of the year, they had 31 kids in the red. That's school-wide at an elementary school. So school-wide kindergarten aides in an elementary school, bringing 2 children out of the red is not a good use of our money. I'm sure it would be really helpful for a teacher to be able to have another adult in the classroom to help them out with their load. But we're here to both help teachers, but our focus is on the students and their learning. And so I'm actually not really in support of allocating those funds directly to a kindergarten aide. I'd rather see it go to tutors, to the kids that we've identified, and can state that these kids need an aide, they need a tutor, they need extra help. So that's where I stand.
Ms. Smith?
Through the chair, may I ask Ms. Moline, as she has expertise in reading and
Can you bring it a little
yeah,
closer?
sure. I'd like to ask Ms. Moline, since she does have expertise in reading, and to comment on that, what the situation with the kindergarten aides is. I'm inclined to support kindergarten aides because kindergarten used to be half day with half as many kids. Now it's whole day, twice as many kids, and the kids don't know how to hold a pencil. So,
So to some of Mr. Sampson's comments, I agree that moving 2 kids from the red is an unacceptable piece of data for our district, which is specifically why we're going to do a full-on focus and double down on that. And it doesn't matter if they're a kindergarten teaching assistant or a tutor, they will be involved in making sure that those kids move out of the red and become readers. The idea behind them being in kindergarten is similar to what Ms. Smith was saying about where I believe the seed of those kindergarten aides started was with more the raise in the PTR, having more kids in a kindergarten class, and having the extra support in kindergarten. What I will tell you about reading and teaching students to read, kindergarten is a crucial step in that process. There are skills that our kindergartners need to leave their kindergarten class with so they can launch into the next level of learning to become a reader. So I could see great value in front-loading those kindergarten classes with quality teaching assistants who can make sure that if there's a student that is in the red, as you say, or a struggling reader, gets that attention specifically. So it may be a shift in how we utilize our kindergarten aides and training them specifically to support kids in certain skills that they may be lacking, like that very basic beginning phonemic awareness skill that often gets missed in kindergarten if you don't have some explicit focus in that. So while we may call them teaching assistants in kindergarten, utilizing them to be very targeted and very specific on the services that they provide in that kindergarten class because we do have larger kindergarten classes, and having someone in there that can specifically focus on those reading skills, I think would be of great value, especially if we can get them skilled in kindergarten, ready to go to first grade with the skills they need in first grade. So I hope that answers your question and adds some clarity to why kindergarten teaching aides or teaching assistants would be a valuable tool at that grade level.
Ms. Sanderson?
And just to give some clarity to Mr. Sampson's concern and the comments from Ms. Moline, the one thing that we need to keep at the forefront of our focus is staffing, having what we need to work with students. But the one thing that we have not taken into a great accountability is trauma. No student's going to learn how to do anything if they come to you and they're traumatized. I know it's an old argument, but I'm telling you, in these last 2 years, we have had kids traumatized, and we've yet to see how that's working out. Behaviors, so we load the classes up, like Ms. Smith said, so you have less people who can really start to target, identify, and then focus on bringing those students from trauma into a place of learning. And then you throw in poverty and hunger, and it's a thing that we are going to face no matter what we do. But to me, having been in the classroom and witnessed how kids respond to loving staff and enough staff, that the teacher might be working with a group, may not see something, but her support can see something or know of something that, Ms. Jones, don't come at Timmy like this today because Timmy had this happen at his house last night. Those are the things that all of our teaching staff are up against, and we have yet to get any kind of feedback as to what the trauma has been like on our students. I mean, we hear stuff and we know stuff, but we don't have anything like hear what the numbers are saying. And all of that plays into what we're doing. So I just throw that out there because I know from my experience working with students, you have to get past the trauma before you can start to teach them anything. And our kids are not trusting, they don't feel safe, and throw hunger and poverty into all that. And it's ongoing. It's what we face in public education. So just putting it out there. But I am for supporting leaving the kindergarten teaching assistants in place.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Doran?
Thank you. I strongly support the administration's recommendation of using the allocation from the borough for the teaching assistants at kindergarten. And I think when I look at that over the years, we've moved beyond kindergarten aides to teaching assistants, which I think is much more specific, and seeing them long-term and short-term in the kindergarten classroom. They are tutoring. They're directly instructing students. They also free up the teacher to directly work with students. And so it benefits that whole year of learning literacy across the board, many areas of literacy that is there for the kindergartners and prepares them for first grade. And I know that they've also, and I believe it was last year, when we were talking about kindergarten teaching assistants, also discussing how, in essence, they can help with a first grader transition to kindergarten, who's struggling at that beginning. They can also, and kindergarten teachers and first grade teachers have always worked hand in hand. And so it helps that bridge. The other thing that I think is really important is I am just thrilled with the Assembly action to meet our full funding request for local contribution, and then to give an additional amount. And this is not unprecedented. It actually has to do with literacy. But the borough at one point gave, and I can't tell you exactly how many years ago, putting in the area of 20 or 25 years, but they got down to the last 5 minutes, and I've told the story, but I think it's important with this also. They gave money that established the Elementary Reading Improvement Initiative. It was extra above our request, and they gave an intent. Yes, we could have used it any way. The board at that time could have used it any way they wanted, but as the district and the board said, yes, that's an important thing, and we are going to take that money and do it. And I think that's, there's a credibility with the borough to also, and it's directly related to a need that we have, and we would have loved to have funded. We would have continued that if we had had the funding. So I think it's not out of the ballpark. It's right there in the stadium. And I think it's really beneficial for kids and for the teachers. And especially at this time, too, as we're having kids who are impacted not only in our K-12 school system, but the pre-Ks, that students may not have had as much exposure as they would have otherwise, even with family members, et cetera. So during formative years, so I think it's very appropriate. The other thing that I wanted to say that the suggestions that I put out of halftime ADs at 2 schools, the board travel, and Hutch magnet school support were in the priority order that I just stated. And lastly, looking at the recommendation, and I guess I don't really care whether it goes, the 5 million stays in state funding or they stay in CARES, because most of those 9 things, 6 of the 9 things are already funded. We've said, yes, we're going to do these, half a dozen one, half a dozen the other, which pocket it comes out of. I do see the high school counselors, though, as I was glad to see it on the list. I would see that as a high priority and would actually like to, I would encourage that if we're getting extra money, we use it for something, because I think that does have a real impact for our high schoolers who have gone through tremendous times. And I've listened to some of the graduation speeches and been at some of the schools, at all the high schools, realizing that for a lot of those students, they had a disruptive high school. They came in, shortened year, they had a remote year, and then they had, kind of a mixed recovery year. And so I think having that support for them really becomes critical. And I would see that as meeting the CARES, or however we want to fund it. Again, I don't care which pocket it comes out of. I think it's half a dozen one, half a dozen the other. I'm not all excited about the activity funding, although I'm concerned that it was 20%. That does have an impact on our schools. I would love to see that increased, but I'd see counselors first, activity funding second, and I know our fund balance, we need to get our fund balance addressed in one way or another. And whatever dollar we put in there, even if it's $1, it's a dollar in the right direction. So.
Ms. Marati, and then myself.
Thanks. So I wholeheartedly support the intent of the borough and using the $607,418 for the 14 kindergarten aides. I also support the $350,000 for the high school counselors for the similar reasons Mr. Doran just stated. I think we need to consider the essay contract days, the 700 to 800,000. And I support Mr. Doran's note about supporting magnet status of Hutch. So I also agree with Ms. Smith that we need to ensure that we have more funds in the general fund balance and less in the leftover CARES funds due to the grant restrictions placed on the CARES grant funds. And that being said, through the chair, could we run scenarios on that as well as the multiple the items that multiple board members have suggested, such as the ones that I just stated?
Are we talking about adding back the Hutch counselors, go ahead and make your request that you were talking about? Oh,
Could I
Yes.
reflect back to Ms. Marati? And so we're looking at 2.0 FTE at Hutch. We're looking at high school counselors at the 3 identified high schools. We're looking at the 5 days for school term ESSA staff. Activity coordinator, 1.0 FTE activity coordinator. Just want to confirm that's on your list of supporting, or
Yeah, to be clear, I actually support the admin's memo with the ESSA contract days and the Hutch support, magnet support. I think that's the only thing on there that's different, because the admin's memo has the 14 kindergarten aides, correct?
correct?
Yeah, so I think the only thing not included in the admin's memo are the ESSA contract days and the Hutch.
And Hutch. Okay. And right. And then the only other question, so the 5 days for school term ESSA staff, let's call it 750,000. It's in the 700s. And then you have 2 FTE of Hutch, that would be about 235,000. So you're just shy of $1 million there. That would okay. You're going to go back. And just to clarify, Ms. Marati, your intent would be, is it to return back to shifting expenditures from CARES over to general fund as we had the original illustration shown?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, and that's what I was saying about it needing, and I was just repeating what I think Ms. Smith was saying, was because of the restriction on CARES funds and the lack of restriction on general funds. So shifting those things into general fund.
Okay, so Ms. Smith's talking points were centered around preserving our CARES budget more status quo rather than shifting. So are you agreeing with those statements, or?
Yes.
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 Okay, give us a moment.
So while they're calculating, just a few comments on or just really one comment on the 5 days for the ESSA staff. In our conversation and our priority listing, it was important that we fund as closely to the classroom as possible, and those while they would impact at some level the classroom, not directly. So keeping that funding closest to the student and closest to the classroom was why we were going to maintain the 5 days savings from the ESSA contract. So that's just additional information for our philosophical approach to the possible influx of funding.
Mr. Dorn, I have you in the queue.
Okay, so this, how we have the spreadsheet set up now, kind of keeps with the talking points of preserving more dollars in the general fund balance. We keep the CARES budget somewhat in line with the recommended CARES list. And then as you get lower down, we have the 14 teaching assistants with general fund dollars. These 11 FTE are currently in CARES. We're keeping them in CARES. We're adding back the 3 high school counselors. Was the intent there general or CARES? We have
I think we need to have more general
Okay.
funds available, less CARES funds available.
Okay, so, and if then we can just go reinstate. So let's take direction from you, Ms. Marati. The 2 positions at Hutch, CARES.
I'm sorry, yeah, so CARES, I want to spend more CARES.
CARES. So
Spend less
CARES,
general
CARES
fund
across the board.
for this scenario.
Okay, so and the 5 days there does need to be general fund. It wouldn't qualify under CARES. And then we have as well the district-wide activity funding. The 220 would be general fund as well.
Is that I'm sorry, through the chair, can I ask? Is that activity funding, is that 20%?
Correct.
Are there, I'm,
You're amenable to eliminating that?
for this scenario.
Okay. Okay, and so just to review, everything in CARES except for the 14 teaching assistants and then restoring the 5 days for school term as a staff there at the bottom. So there is 5 million to fund balance, and then with a remaining of about 3.2 million in CARES at the end of FY23.
So that'd be about 8.2 million total. Okay, thank you.
Could you scroll up, please, so I can see the bottom? I had myself in the queue, but I'm going to put myself back at the bottom so I can digest this. And we'll go to Mr. Doran and then Ms. Smith.
Okay. One thing that I think is important to note for the Hutch, I did have a conversation with Robin Taylor, principal at Hutch, earlier, just to make sure I was in ballpark and not getting ahead of where they were and stuff like this, and why I prioritized the order. She did say that the halftime activity director is actually more beneficial or would be a priority first, because just trying to cover everything with 2 administrators rather than 3 really impinges on the operation of the school or has an impact on it. And so I would, I would say ask administration to maybe have a conversation. I mean, that, even if that might be at the cost of 2 positions, and I do think that's an important thing. But I also want to recognize operations of schools. And so I think it's important to share that priority there. And she very much said, I've already had some conversations over the past with Bruce Bell at Van Nielsen, that, as 2 small schools, that activity director makes a real difference when they have to cover so many activities. Whether you have 2 people or 3 people to kind of spread that load makes a difference. So so just in terms of priorities, that's one of the things I have a little bit of hesitation in saying, oh yes, I would go right to, I firmly believe in the 2 positions and equity between magnet schools if we're going to really do a magnet school and support that. But I don't want to lose the activity director, which is a shared position, or not, it wouldn't be a shared position, it'd be 0.5 allocated to each of our small high schools. Because I cannot see our district-wide person covering 5 high schools and giving that predominance to the 2 smallest schools who are the most hamstrung on that. And administration knows the impacts of those operations things better than us. So I guess I either want the activity director in there, but administration, help me out. I mean,
Yeah.
tell me where.
Sure. To your point, Mr. Dorn, about having an activity coordinator in the schools, those small schools still have all the same activities as the larger schools. So it's not as if you have a smaller school, so you have less activities. So the value of having that position is real, and it would be a substantial burden on the one AP at those 2 schools to take up the activity coordinator's position. That's a fact. And in the regular operations of a school, to have a person half time dedicated to that work would be a big plus. And in your layers of priority, I could see that the activity coordinator could be a greater asset to the operations day-to-day than the additional FTE for the small school allocation. So I could see how you would have the priority for the activity coordinator if you had to do one or the other, that the activity coordinator could be a pretty valuable piece in the operations of the day-to-day school.
So I guess I would put that in as my priority. And then, even if that would mean that the small school allocation, I mean, I would love to see it be at 2. I think it's where it should be. But if it's a give and take, I would support both of those. But that definitely the AD is in there.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you. I'm just having a difficult time getting at our end game. And in my opinion, I would like for the $5 million from wherever, from the state, to go to our savings fund. And that I think it would be in the interest of the board for each of us to just basically prioritize our top 4 or 5 priorities of what to do with anything over the $5 million. I think that I hear a consensus forming that we need to build our fund, and that we're understanding that we already worked out our COVID money, that Ms. Luke's point originally was that we need to build our fund, and I think I hear that most of the board members are seeing that and supporting it. We're just having some differences on what our priorities are for any funds after that $5 million, and that it would be the best use of our time to just put forward what is your priorities, what are your top several priorities, give it to the administration and let them work with that. That's just my opinion, that would be the best use of our time at this time.
President Luke, I think that's a great suggestion.
I've got you in the queue. I honestly don't disagree because it sounds as though everybody seems to be pretty much in consensus that 5 million in the general fund is a priority. And, Hutch, totally support, whatever. Put that in COVID money. Like, great. I think and it seems as though there's about 4 different things: the activities, Hutch, counselors, ESSA, seem to be the four kind of priorities floating around with some board members. So I would say in light of time or in light of maybe discussion, we could have those priorities, four different priorities sent to you guys. Because we obviously can't vote on it tonight.
Right. So you named four. I heard some others, so I want to make sure that we're like around the same four, or we could have a list of our top five, and we spend the money to that down to that level. But I've heard several different priorities, and more than four actually. So if we could just clarify that the activity coordinators is a priority. No. Counselors a priority. So when we built the list, we included in our list those positions that were cut outright. So they didn't get picked up in CARES and they're not being funded anywhere. And so some of those were the kindergarten teaching assistants, but there were others on this list that were cut outright that made it on this list. And Mr. DeGraw, those are the high school counselors, the
The activity funding, district-wide activity funding, the counselors, and then the 14 kindergarten teaching assistants.
So of the list for the priority, so I can get a sense, is the board looking at restoring those positions that were cut out, right, and aren't funded in either CARES or general fund?
I think that it looks as though the consensus is keeping as much as possible in our general fund. So utilizing the funding within our CARES funding.
President Luke, yeah, if I may, maximizing CARES expenditures to the best of our ability, assuming that the expenditures qualify. So we've delineated a couple items. If we restore 5 contract days to the ESSA folks, that'll need to be general fund, for example.
Right.
But yes, everywhere we can utilize CARES funds, utilize CARES funds. That's
Right.
what I'm hearing.
Right. And I mean, when I was going to speak, I was going to give you my thoughts of what I would like it to be. But I can definitely just email that.
Maybe that would be most helpful if we could get an email list of priorities that would be in the general fund once we have our $5 million in our fund balance. Anything over that, we would utilize, we would go to this list and start spending down. Is that what I'm hearing? No.
Ms. Smith?
I just want to clarify that the 14 kindergarten aides was a separate issue for me. That the $650,000 from the borough for the 14 kindergarten aides was separate. That I do support that and keeping that there separate from this continuing issue. That I'm talking about the second part of the potential $5 million state funding, saying that that potential $5 million I'd like to see go to a savings fund. And anything over that $5 million, start looking at restoring the things that are not currently in CARES, such as the school counselors, the activities fund, the things that are on this list that we didn't already fund in CARES. So that's really where I was at. To me, we have already funded almost all of these things through CARES before. So it's just like the kindergarten teaching assistants, the 18, they were already in CARES. They don't need to be on my list. So on my list are going to be, the district-wide activity funding, the high school counselors. I'm going to add the whole entire 2.5 ACs because I just think they're really important to the way that school works. But so basically, my list is going to have things that are not in CARES on our approved CARES list, which is attached right here. that I'd like to see anything over $5 million could be used toward those things. That was my intention with my statement. And so I wouldn't want board members to waste their time by putting the 18 kindergarten assistants on there, because we already have those in CARES. To just be understanding specifically that these are things that are not included on this last page CARES list that you would want to spend money on if we got over $5 million from the additional state funding.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That brings it into focus for me. Mr. DeGraw, do you have any further questions?
So just to clarify, utilizing general fund dollars, once we've reached a $5 million threshold of fund balance, restoration, openness from you, Ms. Smith, on utilizing general fund dollars for specific items. Okay. Yes, one, if I may, thank you, President Luke. One suggestion, and this is just a suggestion, if it's a ridiculous idea, just say so. We could send out the board a list of items we have heard tonight, and board members could rank those items or say, I don't support. I mean, I don't know if that, I'm seeing a head shaking. Okay.
That would be a no from Ms.
Bad idea. I retract that idea.
I've got Ms. Marati, Mr. Sampson, and then Mr. Doran on the queue.
Thanks. I'm happy to email Mr. McGraw anytime, my priorities, but I just provided my priorities, and they are shown here on the screen to include admin's suggestions, as well as the, which include the high school counselors and the 14 kinder aides. So as well as the ESSA contract days and the support for the magnet status of Hutch. And so that being said, you can see that for my scenario, there's almost exactly 5 million left over for the general fund balance, as well as an additional 3.2 million in CARES funds. But I also agree that we could, I think Mr. DeGraw said, maximize CARES funds. That would leave actually over the 5 million in general fund balance that we've been talking about.
Mr. Sampson.
Thank you. Well, for starters, I don't understand why the teaching assistants are in the general, why they can't be utilized in the CARES. I understand that the borough gave us $600 and something thousand, but if we're going to go ahead and allocate the money, I'm not sure why we don't put that in the CARES also. Secondly, the ESSA, $7.75 million. Could you imagine if we put 2 teaching assistants in the kindergarten classrooms? Maybe we wouldn't be in the same situation we were in 25 years ago when the borough was giving us money for this same problem. I think what we're doing is putting money into something, and we have to start changing the way we do it. As Ms. Malin said, that was a caveat that I had to supporting the 14 kindergarten aides. Of course, we need to have kindergarten aides in the kindergarten class, where that's the most important time. Their little brains are developing, and it sets them up for success, right? Well, unfortunately, the data shows that it's not being useful. So we have to do something different. It doesn't negate the fact that there's still a need there. But throwing good money after bad, it doesn't make any sense to me. As to the $5 million, I'm in agreement that at no point in time should we consider any equation that brings down our general fund balance to under 5 million. But with that being said, these additional buybacks, there's only half a dozen of them here. I'm not understanding why why don't we just get these one at a time and vote on these in a meeting instead of sending them to us in a package of 4? And how about another package of a different 4 or 5, mix them up, throw the cards on the table, another package of 5. Why don't we just go down the list and vote yay or nay and get on with it, instead of I say I like this and he says he likes that, and I'll draw you a bigger smiley face, which means I like it more. I mean, can't we just vote on this stuff?
Not during our work session.
I'm talking about, why don't we just vote on this stuff instead of asking the administration to somehow read our minds when we can't tell them, when we can't vote here? Like, we're talking about putting ESSA on there, and I'm not in agreement with putting the ESSA back on. Miss Smith apparently is in agreement with that, so I'm not sure why that would be on there if half of us want it and half of us don't. To just say, well, we're going to put that on there, and
So what we're doing is we are going to email Mr. DeGraw or Mrs. Moline and to give them the things that we are going to request as putting back onto the budget. So when the time does come, we can take those items one by one and we can vote, absolutely. And I think that will streamline it so that we can look at each of those items and they will have what those items will do to the end result of the budget. That way, that budget process on the back end can be more streamlined so that they don't have to go away for a night or a day or two to calculate everything. They already have everything in front of them. And so that's the intent of giving them the information, the requests now, so that they can do all of the budget and number crunching before the meeting.
well, I feel like they're the ones that gave us all the ideas for the most part, with the exception of one or two from Miss Marati. So, I mean, they're pretty much the ones that brought it to us, and then hopefully we can just vote on it. And you said that we can vote on it one at a time?
Yeah, whatever items the board gives to them, to administration, we can take, for example, the ESSA contract days. We can either vote that up or down
Fantastic.
and absolutely streamline that process. And then I have I almost said Mr. DeGraw, Mr. Doran.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, for priorities, you don't want to state that tonight. You want us to send an email individually to Ms. Mullane. Is that right?
Yes, please.
Okay. And through the chair, just as we're discussing general fund, I'm just suggesting we don't use savings. It's not really a savings account. And I've watched over the years where that has caused some confusion. And that we use the general fund, which is there. It's for really operational purposes, not really to build up a savings. And it's a small difference, but we've had issues on that conversation in the community before. So, and I don't know whether the administration wants to address this or not, but we have had an email just earlier today that we will be considering an FPA contract pending FPA's membership vote. But what impact, if you could just clarify what the financial impact is to budget? Is there budget adjustment, how that's being dealt with? And if that's not appropriate at this time, I don't know. But
So,
I don't know if that's appropriate at this
yeah,
time.
Because it is talking about contract negotiation, it was not, and we did not inform the public, we cannot discuss any portion of the negotiation process.
okay, but we'll know. We'll know if it's before the board or not. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Smith, did you still have something you wanted to share?
I only wanted to say I don't understand the emailing, because I can say right now, it's just the priority for me would be 3 counselors. I wish there was all the 2.5 athletic coordinators or activity coordinators. Put back the activity fund. They're just the things that were not already in CARES. I don't have any other priorities, really. I mean, I feel like that takes about 2 minutes. right here. And if there's no support for something, or there's only one person who wants to deal with an item, we don't need to put that to a vote, and we don't need to have it to the board. So, not voting, just saying. I'm just saying, those are my priorities, if anyone.
Can you repeat the three, Ms. Smith?
Yeah, I mean, the three counselors, they were not on the, in the CARES money before, correct?
The district-wide activity funding,
The district-wide activity funding, right, the 220.
and then all 2.5
I
FTE
just
of the
really have a
ACs.
priority for those 2.5.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
So if I'm hearing Ms. Smith say that the priority is anything that wasn't funded through general fund or CARES.
Right, that you were already recommending, but also my own little heart would like all the 2.5 ACs. But that's it really. I mean,
Okay.
I don't expect we're gonna get millions and millions of dollars, so that's already a lot of money right there.
All right, let's go ahead and, if you guys don't need it in writing, Miss Marati, I think you stated yours.
Said it so many times, but I'm happy to say it again. It's the admin's memo, all the suggestions that admin provided, plus Hutch magnet support, so the 2 FTEs, and the ESSA 5 days put back in. I think that is it. That's not included because the kindergarten aides are included in the memo.
Correct.
And the counselors are included in the memo. And, oh, I had a question, actually. Is that okay? How many, in this scenario, because I can't see all the way up, how many activity coordinators are funded in this one?
1.0 district-wide was where we landed with recommended.
So I see the one at the top on the second line, district-wide activity, but if you go down, there's another one.
Right here.
So there's 2, right?
Yeah, so we were running a hypothetical with Mr. Doran's
Yeah.
scenario of 2.5s.
Right, so in this scenario, there's 2 activity coordinators, one through CARES and one through CARES, so 2.
Correct, 2.0.
Yeah,
One district-wide and then a 0.5 at each of the small high schools was this scenario.
so this scenario is my priority.
Perfect. Mr. Sampson?
Yeah, just put them all on the list.
Ms. Sanderson?
That'll work.
I could echo Ms. Marati's. Those are fine because of what's already included, the memo plus.
Okay. And I have nothing to add as a priority. We've already discussed my priority of making sure that we have more than 5 million in our fund balance.
Did Mr. Dorn go?
Oh, I apologize. I got distracted. I will let Mr. Doran go in just a second. Hutch, I think that's a great value. I ensure the equity, and then anything above the 5 million that we get, add back the activity fund, counselors, activity coordinators. I don't care, but don't go below the 5 million. Mr. Doran. Oh, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, are these statements in support, they're in support of what we have illustrated here, is what I'm hearing, of a total of 2.0. Ms. Marati just stated that, and then Ms. Luke.
I'm just saying
Sure.
what has already been stated,
Okay.
I'm in support of looking at
Okay.
in front of us.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Doran.
Could you scroll down? Okay, so if I'm correct, the 0.5 at each of the small schools is not on that list.
It is right here, Mr. Dorn.
No, that's the district-wide, and it's not elsewhere.
Yeah, we just need to retitle that.
But then the district-wide is off the list. Is that right?
No, it's
It's higher
see it
right
up there.
here.
Okay.
So yeah,
All right.
Ms. Herbert's retitling that. There we go. At each high school is what that's going to say.
Each small high school.
Small high school, yes.
Okay, and that's specifically Hutch and Ben Eielson.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Then I think that has my priorities because they are the AD for each of the small high schools, halftime, the high school counselors, the Hutch, the ESSA. And so I think we've got all of those on there.
Okay, everyone has had an opportunity to share their priorities. Anything else from administration or any further questions from administration or clarification?
No, nothing further. What I will do is send an email with kind of a summary of what we covered and make sure that we're on the right track and we're on the same train out to the board, just to make sure we're clear on what we're doing.
Perfect, thank you. Any further clarifications from you or your team?
I think we're good. We very much appreciate this time and this work.
Thank you. I think we'll have a very good meeting on the 7th. And just as a reminder, that is when the budget will be before us, hopefully.
Yeah, and just to,
Hopefully.
yes, President Luke, just to, if the governor acts by this Friday, we'll be able to solidify numbers and then have those numbers ready for the memo and all of the information necessary for the board to approve that approved budget on the 7th. If he delays past that date this Friday, we'll need to have a special meeting. It will be able to be brief. We've had special meetings before, and it is able to be brief, and 15, 20 minutes, something of that nature. So,
Perfect. Well, thanks.
one more item, if I may. Almost forgot. Just wanted to put an item on the board's radar related to the Nutrition Services Fund. There's been a lot of dramatic movement back and forth in our nutrition services world over the last 2 years. So last year, we saw a dramatic decline in meals served because of school closure. And so the fund balance, we spent significantly more dollars last year than we brought in because of that meal count decline. This year, the meal counts have shot through the roof because meals were free to all students district-wide, and we were reimbursed for 100% of those meals, regardless of free and reduced classification, et cetera. All meals were free. So nutrition services folks were complete and total rock stars this year, and they dealt with vacancies. And so all year long, we've been dealing with admin nutrition services staff in buildings serving meals to students all over the district, and they've just been phenomenal. I bird walked there. The reason why I bring this up, we have, and I want to put this on the radar for the board, 2 items. In the current budget that we're working, we have about a $270,000 transfer planned in the budget. Our recommendation is going to be to eliminate that transfer because the amount of money coming in is going to put a significant positive fund balance in the Nutrition Services Fund at year's end. I'm expecting it to be in the range of at least around $1.5 million of surplus in that fund. Typically, on a normal year, we have to subsidize anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000 to the Nutrition Services Fund. But I see that need in the near term disappearing because of the number of meals we serve, or significant revenue boost in that fund. On that note, I would also like to, and I'm going to present to the board at the June 6th, 7th meeting, a reversal of the current year transfer that we made. And that current year transfer was around $470,000 that we transferred from the general fund to the Nutrition Services Fund. That has already been done. It was budgeted for, and so it required the board approving the reversal of that transfer. The dollars would go from the Nutrition Services Fund back to the general fund. and would again boost our general fund balance. So in summary, last year we saw a significant decline in revenue. The fund balance of the Nutrition Services Fund is actually in the negative right now of about to the tune of about $1 million, $1.2 million. But with the anticipated revenue that we've already seen 90% of it, so it's certain that it's 90% of it's already come in. We're going to see that move from negative 1.2 to around positive 1.5. Current year transfer as well as the transfer next year will not be necessary. So I just wanted to put that on the board's radar and take any comment or reaction to that.
Mr. Doran?
Thank you. Two questions relative to that. One is, so that may be money that's available to fund positions?
Correct.
Approximately 600,000 or so, 607,000?
For the budget that we're currently working, it's about 270.
Right, but we'll have
1,000.
another 400,000 going into general fund.
Correct. One-time dollars, yes.
Right, okay, we're all one time.
Yeah.
My other question is regarding nutrition and looking forward down the line. And I'm not sure if this federal government has already stated they're going to end
Correct.
the program.
Correct.
So free and reduced applications are going to be extremely important for us. They still were during the pandemic, but less. Do we have plans to really push throughout the summer to really get those in? Because that'll
Yes.
make a big difference
Yes,
for
we already-
next year.
Big drive.
we already started a little bit of that campaign in a couple of different ways, and we'll continue a really intentional push in every way. We started it with our school closure events, making sure that we had nutrition services folks there, helping people understand the importance of filling those out. Kindergarten enrollment has a big piece of that. So we've already started that really big push for our folks to fill out the free and reduced lunch information. And we'll continue that through the summer and then at the beginning of the year next year.
Okay. That includes some PR pushes, maybe announcements on radio or whatever. Is that great? Thank you.
Ms. Marati?
I just want to thank you for catching that and making the decision to, or suggesting the decision to eliminate the transfer. I know that it's really important for the borough when they look at our finances to see the lower balances in those other funds. It's confusing for people that aren't talking about it every day.
Agreed.
Yeah, and so I really appreciate you doing that. And would you say then that that would leave be 8.8 million in the fund balance? That 5 million plus 3.2 plus the 600,000?
Yes.
Not in fund balance, in different buckets, but
Yes.
available.
So the cumulative total is going to be 4 something and 2 something, about 700,000. A little more than 700,000 would be the combined
So about,
positive impact.
so about 8.9 million, which would be the 5 million from the general fund, 3.2 from CARES, and then you said 700,000?
Yeah, correct.
Great, thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time, and especially the effort that you and your team have put in. We appreciate everything that you and your department do. On that note, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Any objection? Seeing none, we're adjourned.